video is an update on my Solstice 1200 km DIY that I aim to ride in June 2018. I did an overview of my plans in 2017 and a couple of updates, but I've left it several months, and the reason I'm doing this one today is tomorrow I'm riding my first 300 km of the month, and that's quite significant in my build up. So here's an overview of today's route. It's my first 300 km of 2018. It's pretty much an out and back route from Bath to Llandovery. To be more precise, the West End Cafe in Llandovery for my lunch. It does vary slightly. So from Bath, I will head up across the Severn Bridge to Chepstow, Usk, Abergavenny. From Abergavenny there's a B road which pretty much parallels the A40 all the way to Brecon. Then after Brecon it's a straight out and back to Llandovery along the A40, and that A40 is very quiet during the week. It's more like a B road. And then on the way back I'll actually take the A40 into Abergavenny and then pretty much back to Bath the same way I went out. Over the winter I've just been riding day rides, mostly 200 km all axes, and I've been doing a few youth hostel trips, but tomorrow I'm up in the distance from 200 to 300 kilometres, and that was always the plan through March, April, and it's just to get my body and my mind used to riding pretty much all day. 300 kilometres is pretty much the distance I'm going to be riding most days on the 1200, and it's quite a jump from 200 to 300 kilometres. So let me try and explain how I deal with that. I've said in some other videos, although Audax is based on the kilometre, the metric format, I quite often do my distances in miles. I like to swap between the two. I always used to see the 200 kilometre distance as 124, 125 miles, a little bit over 100 miles. So using that same frame of reference, I used to think of 300 kilometres as not a third extra, but almost twice the distance. The reason being is 300 kilometres equates to about 187 miles, which is a little bit under 200 miles. So you can see where I'm going here. It felt like the increase from events just over 100 to riding just under 200, it felt quite a significant jump. So several years back, when I was at grown-up school, we were studying behavioural finance, and I remember being in a class once thinking, I wonder if I could apply some of these techniques to my sport. And the more I started to read up about it, the more I realised that what I was studying was very closely related to sports psychology. So I started applying some of the techniques I learned, and one of them, I call it reframe the game. And like any new form of learning, I didn't quite know how to apply it at first, and then one day I was having a conversation about the jump from 200 kilometres to 300 kilometres with a friend of mine, Luke, and he just happened to mention he didn't agree with my view at all. He actually really liked 300s, and I said why. So what Luke explained to me was the reason he liked 300 kilometres so much was because it optimised the daylight. During the spring and the summer months, he would leave home at sunup and get home at sundown, whereas the 200s quite often felt like he'd wasted a bit of the day, and the 400s tired him, and it just completely overnight changed my way of thinking. So that was a classic example of using reframing just to change something from a negative to a positive, just altering the frame of reference. So no longer thinking of it doubling the distance from 100 to nearly 200 miles, which it wasn't anyway. Actually thinking about it from a time perspective, I'm actually going to really be enjoying a long chunk of the day tomorrow. So that's just one of the many techniques. So maybe on some other videos I'll talk about some of the other ones I use, but as regards tomorrow, I'm really looking forward to it. I don't plan on filming much tomorrow. I'll probably take a few photographs on the road, keep the stops to a minimum. Then I plan to do an update at lunch at the West End Cafe. So here we are. just gone 1 o'clock. I'm in the West End Cafe at Llandovery. It's been quite warm this morning. I'm just going to sit down and demolish this lot. Fish cake and chips and peas. So I'm heading that way now, pretty much retracing my route back to Bath. The wind is starting to pick up, and it was against me just for the last 5 or 6 miles into Llandovery. It should be behind me most of the way back to Bath now. So next stop, Bath. So here we are back in Bath, just gone 10 o'clock. The day went fine really, no real sort of aches or pains. I think I'm going to be a little stiff tomorrow. Could I ride another 300 for the next 3 days? No, definitely not. But then I don't really want to. It's just far too early to be that fit. But it's really good to get an early 300 under my belt. Only real problem I had today was clothing. Started off a bit chilly, so I had this a few layers on. Got really hot towards lunchtime. Felt a little bit overdressed most of the afternoon. And then as soon as the sun went down, it got really cold, and I was so glad I did have all these clothes. I would have struggled otherwise. So that's the first 300. As usual, thanks very much for watching. Until next time.